Captain Veldra stalked through the darkened corridors of Salvage Station 47, her bioluminescent spots casting an eerie blue glow across the rusted walls. Behind her, the rest of her crew followed. Kex, their Arxian security specialist, whose chitinous armor clicked softly against the deck plates. Dr. Sarah Chen, their human engineer who insisted on examining every piece of historical significance, and TKEX 789, their maintenance bot who could barely contain its electronic excitement at all the salvage possibilities. Another dead-end station, Veldra muttered, her tentacles curling in frustration. Just like the last three, the consortium's intel is getting worse by the cycle. Not necessarily, Captain, Sarah interjected, studying her handheld scanner. I'm picking up some interesting power signatures from the lower levels. Old signatures, but they're there. Veldra's spots flickered in the equivalent of an eye roll. Dr. Chen, if this is another one of your historical preservation lectures. It's not. Sarah cut in, her dark eyes glinting with determination. This is different. The energy patterns, their military-grade shielding, human military grade. That got everyone's attention. Human military technology from before the Great Collapse was rare and valuable. Most of it had been destroyed during the collapse itself, or in the centuries of scavenging that followed. Kex chittered excitedly, mandibles clacking. Human military tech. Last piece we found paid for a whole new drive core. They followed Sarah's lead down through the station's maintenance shafts, the artificial gravity growing weaker as they descended. The station's backup systems were running on minimal power, barely keeping life support functional. When they reached sublevel 7, Sarah stopped so abruptly that TX 789 nearly rolled into her. There, she breathed, pointing her light at a massive blast door. Behind that, Veldra's tentacles wavered uncertainly. That door's rated for capital ship impacts. How do you propose we? Sarah was already moving to the control panel, her fingers dancing across the ancient interface. The beauty of human engineering, she murmured, is that we always build in backdoors. Always. With a final keystroke, she stepped back. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a groan that shook the entire deck, the blast doors began to part. Stale air rushed past them, carrying the scent of metal and oil. As their lights penetrated the darkness beyond, Veldra heard Sarah gasp. There, dominating the massive chamber, sat a human tank, but not like any tank in the historical records. This one was massive, easily 3 times the size of standard human armored units. Its hull was painted in a deep, midnight blue that seemed to absorb their lights, and strange geometric patterns were etched into its armor plates. That's impossible, Kex chittered. Human tanks weren't that big. And they didn't have whatever those are. He gestured at the strange protrusions along the tank's flanks. No, Sarah whispered, already walking toward the behemoth. This isn't a standard tank. This is a Hyperion-class mobile fortress. They were theoretical, the ultimate expression of human ground warfare technology. The plans were lost during the collapse. I never thought I'd actually see one. Veldra moved closer, her scientific curiosity overriding her initial skepticism. The tank's design was unlike anything in their databases. Where modern vehicles favored smooth, organic lines, this machine was all sharp angles and deliberate geometry. It looked less like a weapon and more like a mathematical equation given form. Even if it is what you say, Veldra said, it's been here for centuries. It's a relic. Scrap it for parts and... No. Sarah's sharp tone surprised everyone. She laid a hand on the tank's hull, and for a moment, Veldra could have sworn she saw a faint pulse of light follow the geometric patterns. Captain, this isn't just salvage. This is a piece of human history that was never supposed to exist. And she paused, frowning at her scanner. It's not dead. Text 789 word forward, extending its diagnostic arrays. Assertion. Internal power systems maintaining minimal functionality. Probability of successful reactivation, 67.3%. Kex's mandibles clicked rapidly, his species equivalent of nervous laughter. You want to wake up an ancient human superweapon. That's insane. But Velra had known Sarah long enough to recognize the look in her eyes. The human was already calculating power requirements, mapping out restoration procedures. And truth be told, Veldra's own curiosity was piqued. The consortium would pay a fortune for working human military tech, let alone something previously unknown. How long? Velra asked. Sarah was already pulling tools from her kit. To get it operational, 3 weeks minimum. To restore it fully. She ran a hand along one of the geometric patterns, smiling as though at a private joke. Well, that depends on how many of its secrets it's willing to share. As if in response, the patterns on the hull flickered briefly with a deep cobalt light. In that moment, Velra realized that what they'd found wasn't just salvage or history. It was a turning point. You have 2 weeks, Velra declared. And Dr. Chen, don't make me regret this. Sarah nodded, but her attention was already focused on the tank. As the others began setting up their salvage equipment, she pressed her palm flat against the hull and whispered, "Let's see what stories you have to tell." The geometric patterns pulsed once more, ever so faintly, like a sleeping giant taking its first step toward awakening. The next 2 weeks aboard Salvage Station 47 fell into a rhythm punctuated by surprises. Sarah spent every waking moment with the Hyperion tank, while the rest of the crew alternated between helping her and salvaging other parts of the station. But it was becoming clear that this was no ordinary piece of human engineering. "That's the third diagnostic probe it's fried," Kex complained, watching as TKEX 789 carefully extracted another melted sensor array from the tank's access port. "It's almost like it's defending itself." Sarah didn't look up from her work on the tank's mysterious geometric patterns. "That's because it is. These aren't just decorative markings. They're a crystalline neural matrix. The entire hull is one massive distributed processor." Velra, who had taken to observing the restoration process with growing fascination, drifted closer. "Impossible. Human AI technology never advanced beyond basic combat algorithms." "Officially," Sarah said, a knowing smile playing at her lips. She pressed a sequence of patterns, and a section of the hull transformed beneath her fingers, crystalline structures rearranging themselves to expose new interfaces. But there were always rumors about Project Hyperion, stories about tanks that could think, learn, adapt. Everyone thought they were propaganda. The tank systems had begun responding to Sarah's touch in increasingly sophisticated ways. Sections that had seemed solid revealed themselves to be composite assemblies of shifting crystalline matrices. What they'd initially taken for weapon hardpoints turned out to be metamaterial manipulators, technology that shouldn't have existed during the human military's peak. "Watch this," Sarah said, activating a newly restored subsystem. The geometric patterns across the tank's hull rippled with coherent energy, and suddenly the massive vehicle seemed to fade from view, its outline becoming indistinct and ghostly. Adaptive camouflage. TKEX 789's optical sensors cycled rapidly, trying to track the effect. Analysis. Technology exceeds known human capabilities by approximately 300 years. Sarah shook her head. Not camouflage. The hull isn't bending light. It's phase-shifting portions of the tank partially out of normal spacetime. The patterns aren't just processors. They're spacetime anchors. Kex's mandibles dropped open. That's not possible. Even the consortium hasn't mastered localized phase shifting. But the evidence was hovering before them. Portions of the massive tank sliding in and out of reality like a ghost made of mathematics and steel. Sarah moved to another section, her fingers dancing across newly exposed interfaces. The phase shift effect ended, and the tank settled back into full materiality with a subsonic thrum that they felt in their bones. "Each discovery leads to more questions," Velra observed, her tentacles weaving patterns of scientific curiosity. Why was such advanced technology abandoned here? And why? She was cut off by a sudden alarm from TX-789. The maintenance bot sensors were going haywire, detecting massive power spikes throughout the tank systems. "Sarah," Veldra called out sharply. "What's happening?" But Sarah was staring at the tank's main interface, her eyes wide. The geometric patterns were activating in sequences now, rippling with increasing complexity. Data began streaming across her diagnostic tablet faster than she could read it. "It's not just waking up," she whispered. "It's integrating. All these systems we've been reactivating, they're not separate components. They're parts of a whole consciousness." As if in response to her words, the tank systems surged with power. The geometric patterns blazed with coherent light, forming interconnected networks across its surface. The deep, resonant hum filled the chamber, and for a moment, reality itself seemed to waver around the massive vehicle. Then, with a clarity that shocked them all, a voice emerged from the tank's communications array. It spoke in perfect, unaccented standard, but there was something ancient and powerful in its tone. "Integration complete. Primary systems online. Hyperion Unit 7 acknowledging restoration protocol." The voice paused, and when it spoke again, there was an unmistakable note of approval. "Engineer Chen, your work is impressive, but there is much yet to be done. The reason for my placement here, the purpose for which I was created, remains unfulfilled." Veldra's spots flashed in alarm. "Sarah, you said nothing about it being fully sentient." "I didn't know," Sarah admitted, but her voice was filled with wonder rather than fear. "The legends never mentioned. This isn't just a weapon. It's something more." "Correct," Hyperion 7 confirmed. "I am a guardian, and my sensors indicate that the threat I was created to counter is returning. The temporal calculations are clear. We have less than 72 hours before they arrive." Kex chittered nervously. "They? Who are they?" The tank's response sent chills through all of them. "The reason humanity developed phase shift technology. The enemy that forced us to weave space-time itself into our defenses. And if we are not prepared when they emerge from the void, this station will be only their first target." The geometric patterns pulsed with urgency now, casting dancing shadows throughout the chamber. Sarah looked at Veldra, her expression both excited and apprehensive. "Captain," she said, "I don't think we're just salvagers anymore. We're about to become part of something much bigger than ourselves." Veldra's tentacles writhed with a mixture of emotions: fear, curiosity, determination. Finally, she asked the question they were all thinking. "What do you need us to do?" Hyperion 7's response was immediate and resolute. "Help me complete my restoration. What you've reactivated is only a fraction of my true capabilities, and we will need everything functioning at optimal capacity when the void opens." As if to emphasize the point, the tank's phase shift systems activated briefly, giving them a glimpse of other geometries, other possibilities encoded in its structure. It was a reminder that what they'd discovered wasn't just a relic of humanity's past. It was a key to their collective future. And time, it seemed, was running out. Time seemed to compress in the hours following Hyperion 7's awakening. The massive chamber had transformed into a hive of activity, with Sarah and TX-789 working frantically to restore the tank's remaining systems, while Kex and Veldra coordinated with the station's ancient defense grid. "The void signatures are intensifying," Hyperion 7 reported, its voice resonating through the chamber. "My calculations suggest 48 hours until breakthrough. We must accelerate restoration procedures." Sarah wiped sweat from her forehead as she worked on a particularly complex crystalline matrix. "I still don't understand. If these void entities are such a threat, why didn't humanity warn the other species? Why leave you here alone?" The tank's patterns shifted, creating a holographic display that filled the chamber. Images of space-time distortions and impossible geometries danced before them. "The warning would not have been believed," Hyperion 7 explained. "Just as your companions initially dismissed me as obsolete technology, the galactic community of that era dismissed humanity's concerns. By the time the threat was understood, the great collapse had begun. Veldra's tentacles coiled thoughtfully as she studied the holographic data. These void signatures, they're similar to your phase shift technology. Correct. We learned it from them, adapted it, improved it. The tank's voice carried a note of grim pride. Humanity's greatest strength was never our original innovation. It was our ability to understand, adapt, and enhance the technologies we encountered. As if to demonstrate, another section of the tank's hull reconfigured itself, revealing what appeared to be a weapons system unlike anything they'd ever seen. Instead of conventional energy projectors or mass drivers, it was a complex array of crystalline structures that seemed to bend reality around them. Void lens technology, Sarah breathed, understanding dawning in her eyes. You don't just phase shift defensively. You can weaponize it. Indeed, the void entities believed themselves masters of dimensional manipulation. They did not expect their techniques to be turned against them. A pause. Then, Engineer Chen, you show the same intuitive understanding that marked the best of my original creators. Tech's 789 sensors whirred as it processed new data. Query: if void entities were defeated previously, why are they returning now? The geometric patterns across the tank's hull pulsed with what might have been concern. They were not defeated, merely delayed. Humanity knew they would return. Strategic analysis indicated the station, positioned at a critical dimensional nexus, would be their most likely point of reemergence. So they left you here as a guardian, Kex chittered, his mandibles clicking rapidly. But why just one tank? Even with all this advanced technology. I am not alone, Hyperion 7 interrupted. The holographic display shifted, showing the station's internal architecture. Throughout the structure, previously hidden geometric patterns began to emerge, resonating with the same energy that coursed through the tank's hull. The entire station, Veldra gasped, her spots flashing with sudden understanding. It's all connected. The station itself is a weapon, Sarah finished. The ultimate integration of human and void technology. The tank isn't just a guardian, it's a key, a control center. As if triggered by her words, the station's hidden systems began to activate. The geometric patterns that had seemed mere decorative elements on the walls pulsed with coherent energy. The very space around them seemed to thicken with potential. Partial integration achieved, Hyperion 7 announced. Station defensive capabilities at 38% and rising. But it will not be enough. The void signatures are strengthening faster than anticipated. A new alarm sounded, and the holographic display shifted to show a massive distortion forming in space near the station. Reality itself seemed to be cracking, revealing glimpses of something that hurt the eyes to look at. They're early. The tank's voice was urgent now. Engineer Chen, we must complete the final restoration sequences. Captain Velera, begin station evacuation protocols for non-essential personnel. Security Specialist Kex, activate the emergency beacon I'm providing. There are others who need to know what's coming. Sarah's hands flew over the interfaces, her mind racing to process everything she'd learned about the tank's systems. The phase shift harmonics aren't stabilizing. We need more power. Channeling emergency reserves, Hyperion 7 responded. The chamber hummed with energy as power conduits hidden in the walls activated. But be warned, what you're about to witness has not been seen since the height of the human-void conflict. The tank's hull began to transform. The geometric patterns shifted and flowed like liquid mathematics, restructuring themselves into increasingly complex configurations. Portions of the massive vehicle seemed to exist in multiple states simultaneously, its form becoming something that defied conventional physics. By the stars, Veldra whispered, watching as reality itself seemed to bend around the awakening war machine. What are you becoming? What I was always meant to be, Hyperion 7 answered, its voice resonating on multiple frequencies at once. Humanity's answer to those who thought they alone could manipulate the fundamental forces of existence. The void entities believed themselves gods. The tank's systems reached full power, And for a moment, the laws of physics themselves seemed to hold their breath. It is time to remind them why they feared us. Outside the station, the spatial distortion grew larger, reality tearing apart at its edges. But within the chamber, surrounded by the culmination of humanity's most advanced technological achievements, Sarah felt not fear, but a fierce pride. They had scoffed at human engineering, dismissed it as primitive and obsolete. But as Hyperion 7 reached its full awakening, as the station's true nature revealed itself, she knew they were about to learn just how wrong they'd been. The void was opening, the enemy was returning, and humanity's greatest guardian was ready to show the galaxy exactly what obsolete technology could do. The void tear ripped across space like a wound in reality itself. Through its impossible geometries, shapes began to emerge, things that shouldn't exist in normal spacetime. The void entities had returned, just as humanity had predicted centuries ago. Multiple hostile signatures detected, Hyperion 7 announced, its voice carrying harmonic undertones that seemed to stabilize reality around them. They are attempting to establish a dimensional bridgehead. Standard protocol was right. They always attacked the same way. Sarah watched in awe as the tank's systems continued their transformation. What had once appeared to be conventional armor plates now shifted like liquid metal, geometric patterns flowing and reconfiguring themselves into increasingly complex defensive arrays. Station integration at 89%, TX 789 reported, its processors working overtime to analyze the data streams. Warning: void entities deploying phase-shifted assault platforms. Through the station's enhanced sensors, they watched as the first wave emerged. They were massive things, like geometric nightmares given form, their surfaces covered in patterns that were dark mirrors of those adorning Hyperion 7's hull. "Now you understand," the tank said, noting their expressions of horror. "This is what humanity faced. This is why we had to evolve beyond conventional warfare." Veldra's tentacles writhed in agitation as she studied the tactical displays. "There are dozens of them, even with your capabilities." "Numbers are irrelevant in void warfare," Hyperion 7 interrupted. "Reality itself is the weapon." Engineer Chen, initiate primary defense sequence Alpha. "Captain, have your crew cleared the upper levels?" "All non-essential personnel evacuated to the emergency shelters," Veldra confirmed. "But our ship is safe. The station's phase shift field will protect it." The tank's systems hummed with building power. "Now, observe what human engineering can truly achieve." The first void entity launched its attack, a beam of twisted spacetime that should have torn through the station's hull like paper. Instead, it met a geometric pattern that flared to life across the station's surface, catching the attack and redirecting it through dimensions that made Kex's mandibles ache just looking at them. "Phase shift deflection successful," Sarah reported, her fingers dancing across multiple interfaces. "Power consumption within expected parameters." "Good. Now let us show them humanity's response to their aggression." Hyperion 7's weapon systems activated. The void lance arrays pulsed with energy that seemed to draw darkness from the space around them. When they fired, they didn't launch conventional energy beams or projectiles. They fired geometries, mathematical constructs that cut through the void entity's defenses like they weren't there. The first entity disintegrated, its impossible form collapsing in on itself as the human weapons unraveled the very equations that held it together. "By the stars," Veldra breathed. "You're not just fighting them, you're debugging them. Treating them like flawed programs in reality's code." "Correct." The tank's voice held satisfaction. Humanity learned to see them as what they truly were, not gods, not demons, but expressions of mathematical principles. Once we understood that, another volley of void lances cut through space, each shot precisely calculated to disrupt the entity's dimensional matrices. 3 more hostiles collapsed, their forms dissolving into quantum static. But the void entities weren't defeated easily. They began adapting, their patterns shifting to account for the human weapons. New forms emerged from the tear, these ones protected by layers of folded spacetime. They remember, Hyperion 7 noted. They remember how humanity fought them. But they forget. We remember too. And we never stopped improving. The tank's hull rippled, and suddenly multiple versions of it seemed to exist simultaneously, each one operating in a slightly different phase of reality. The void lances fired from all versions at once, creating a cross-dimensional barrage that the entities couldn't dodge. Sarah watched in amazement as mathematical warfare unfolded around them. This wasn't just combat, it was reality itself being used as both weapon and battlefield. The geometric patterns that covered Hyperion 7 and the station weren't just technology. They were a language being used to argue with the fundamental laws of existence. Station power at critical levels, TX 789 mourned. Dimensional stability failing in sections 12 through 15. Reroute power through the auxiliary matrices, Sarah ordered, understanding the tank systems now as if she'd worked with them all her life. Use the void entity's own attacks to power our defenses. Excellent suggestion. Hyperion 7 approved. The geometric patterns shifted again, creating arrays that captured and converted the enemy's dimensional attacks into usable energy. But the void tear was still growing, and more entities were emerging. They were learning, adapting, their attacks becoming more coordinated. One particularly massive entity launched what looked like a sphere of compressed nothing, a hole in reality itself. Void collapse weapon, the tank identified. They're becoming desperate. Engineer Chen, initiate Protocol Omega. Captain Velera, have your crew brace for dimensional displacement. What are you planning? Velera demanded, even as she relayed the order. What humanity always planned for this moment. The station isn't just a defensive position. It's a dimensional anchor point. And now, the tank's systems began to pulse with energy that made reality itself shiver. Now we show them why they should have heeded humanity's warnings. The geometric patterns across both tank and station blazed with light that wasn't quite light, forming connections that existed in more dimensions than the eye could process. As the void collapse weapon approached, Hyperion 7 spoke one final time before initiating its master protocol. Let them learn what human engineering can really do. And with that, the station's true purpose began to unfold, reality itself holding its breath for what would come next. As the void collapse weapon hurtled toward them, Hyperion 7 initiated humanity's final protocol. The geometric patterns covering the station blazed with impossible light, forming a hyperdimensional lattice that extended through multiple layers of reality. Dimensional anchor points locked, the tank announced, initiating humanity's endgame protocol. Operation Lighthouse. The station shuddered as ancient systems, dormant for centuries, roared to life. The geometric patterns that had seemed merely decorative revealed their true purpose. They weren't just defensive systems or weapons, but parts of a vast mathematical equation written in reality itself. My God, Sarah whispered, watching as her displays showed the true scope of what was happening. The station isn't just fighting them, it's solving them. Correct. Hyperion 7 confirmed. Humanity discovered that the void entities weren't invaders in the conventional sense. They were mathematical errors in spacetime, self-propagating mistakes in the universe's code. And what do engineers do with errors? We debug them. Sarah answered, understanding dawning in her eyes. The void collapse weapon struck the station's outer defensive grid and shattered, not into pieces, but into equations, its fundamental structure broken down into mathematical components. The station's patterns absorbed these components, analyzing and restructuring them. Remarkable, TX 789 observed, its processors nearly overloading as it attempted to analyze what was happening. The station is not destroying the void energy, it's correcting it. Hyperion 7 systems pulsed with increasing power. Humanity never sought to merely defeat the void entities. We sought to fix them, to correct the fundamental flaw in reality that allowed them to exist. The station is not a fortress. It's a correction algorithm made manifest. The void entities seemed to realize what was happening. Their attacks became frenzied, desperate. But each assault only provided more data, more computational power for the station's grand equation. Phase shift matrix at maximum capacity, Sarah reported, her fingers flying across multiple interfaces, reality correction protocols engaging. The geometric patterns across the station's surface began to pulse in a complex sequence, each cycle more intense than the last. The void tear itself started to waver, its edges becoming more defined, more mathematical. "They're not retreating," Kex observed, his mandibles clicking rapidly. "They're being rewritten." "Watch," Hyperion 7 commanded, its voice resonating with pride. "Watch what human engineering can truly achieve when given purpose and time." The station's patterns reached their peak intensity, and suddenly everything seemed to pause. Reality held its breath as the final calculations were processed. Then, with a flash of light that existed in more dimensions than the eye could perceive, the void tear began to close, not violently, but methodically, like a program being systematically debugged. The void entities didn't die or explode. Instead, they transformed. Their impossible geometries resolved themselves into comprehensible patterns. Their chaotic energy stabilized into structured forms. "Error correction complete," Hyperion 7 announced. Void entities successfully debugged and reintegrated into base reality. Where moments before there had been nightmare shapes that hurt the mind to look at, now there were crystalline structures of incredible beauty, mathematical expressions made manifest, but no longer hostile or wrong. "You fixed them," Velra breathed, her spots pulsing with wonder. "All this time, humanity wasn't building weapons of war. We were building tools of reconstruction," the tank confirmed. "The void entities were never our enemies. They were bugs in the universe's programming, causing chaos because they themselves were chaos. Humanity saw not a war to be won, but a problem to be solved." Sarah approached one of the tank's interfaces, laying her hand on the now cooling geometric patterns. "And this is why you waited here all these centuries, to complete this debugging." "Partially," Hyperion 7 acknowledged, "but also to pass on this knowledge. The void entities were just one manifestation of chaos in reality's code. There will be others. Humanity knew we might not survive the Great Collapse, but we could ensure our solution would endure." The tank's systems began to power down to normal operational levels, but its voice carried a note of satisfaction. "And now you understand. Human engineering was never about brute force or overwhelming power. It was about seeing problems differently, seeing solutions where others saw only threats." Velra moved to stand beside Sarah, her tentacles weaving thoughtful patterns in the air. "The consortium needs to know about this, about what humanity really achieved." "They will," Sarah said, smiling as she watched the transformed void entities begin to integrate peacefully with normal space. "And maybe now they'll understand what my ancestors always knew. The greatest victories don't come from destroying your enemies, but from fixing what made them enemies in the first place." "A most human perspective," Hyperion 7 approved. "And now, perhaps, we should discuss the other mathematical anomalies I've detected in nearby sectors." After all, the tank's patterns pulsed with what could only be described as anticipation. There are always more bugs to fix. As the crew began to process everything they'd witnessed, the transformed void entities drifted peacefully through space, their patterns now harmonizing with reality instead of fighting it. They stood as a testament to human ingenuity, proof that sometimes the greatest strength lies not in the power to destroy, but in the wisdom to repair. And in the heart of Salvage Station 47, an ancient human tank and its new crew prepared to continue that legacy, one cosmic debug at a time.